You let him in.
Yeah,
Hi, everybody. We had 4 people signed up this morning, so we're excited to see that there are 30 now.
awesome. And thank you everyone for your patience. I had to relocate, and so I just got here a moment ago. But part of the adventure of today's cool new format. Um, so Steph and I are in two different places, sharing the presentation. And earlier today we had people in the room with us as well. So we're trying out some different techniques, and this seems to be going pretty well. Okay, I think we're good.
Yeah, ready to, oh, one more. I noticed people were coming into my other sessions like 20 minutes in, so everybody's just on a different schedule today.
You.
All right, so I guess we'll get going. Thank you again for coming today. We know it's hard some days on professional development days where you just want to sit in your classroom and catch up on grading and do all the things. But we're grateful you're here. And like Jonathan said, we're thankful that um, you guys give us grace and patience days. We try this whole hybrid version. We are a very small team and we're trying to reach as many teachers as we can because so many schools across the state have in-service day today. So we're just trying this model and seeing if it works. But if you think it's horrific and you end up loathing this presentation and thought the Zoom was terrible, you can let us know because we have a survey at the end of our presentation for feedback. So we really appreciate any feedback, whether it's good or not so good, because the last thing we want to do is waste anybody's time. So thank you again. I am Stephanie Magruder. I'm my first year MLTI ambassador. And what that means is for the next 2 years, I am on loan from my school department, which is Ellsworth, to the state of Maine, where we get to just learn a ton and offer professional development. And then after the 2 years, I get to go back to Ellsworth with all my newfound education, hopefully a little bit better than I was before when I left. And Jonathan is my brilliant, wonderful boss, whom I have had the pleasure of learning a lot from. And I'm not just saying that because he's my boss. He's literally the smartest guy I've ever known. So you guys are an esteemed presence today.
Well, that's very kind. I'm Jonathan Warner. I was the tech integrator for Cape Elizabeth Middle School. Before that, tech integrator for Cape Elizabeth Middle School and high school. And before that, an English teacher in Gorham, a past that Steph and I both share as ELA fans. We promise today's discussion will be about more than just integrating this work into your ELA classroom, but that's a passion of both of ours. I was an ambassador like Steph for 2 years, and then for the first 2 years of the program. And then I was asked to stay on to be the ambassador program facilitator. So I help coordinate the work of our amazing distinguished educators and ambassadors. And today we have 14 of us out in 6 schools, providing professional development to hundreds of teachers. And we're so, so excited about that. So
So I think, well, obviously Jonathan doesn't have anyone in his room and neither do I. So you guys are all virtual today. Just to help us with technology, it helps if your cameras are off, which makes us sad because we'd rather remember, like we are all kind of having a little bit of flashbacks to COVID days when we were begging for cameras to be on. And we still prefer that method, but it just makes technology work a little bit more smoothly if it's off, if your video's off. But please, at any time, turn your camera on, holler at us, shout. Please monitor or say anything in the chat. One of us will be monitoring it. So yes, please feel free to get a hold of us however you can. Today's notes, if you haven't had them already from previous sessions, on the left is just a view only. presentation slide deck of all the presentations from today. And on the right is one that you can take notes in, and that is editable. So you can scan there and grab either one of those guys. And there's tiny URL addresses that you can use as well if you don't have a QR code scanner. If you missed that or need the presentation again, please let one of us know and we'll put it in the chat. So don't worry about that. This is a shameless plug for our MLTI student conference that happens in May. It's a lot of fun. It's a day where we just offer a ton of different sessions, mostly surrounding technology. And the kids just get to come and play and learn, and it's a great time. And we're always looking for fellow presenters, which is you, because you educators are doing amazing things in your classroom. So if there's anything that you might want to show off and teach other kids and adults in the area, please scan that QR code for more information and sign up to register. We would love to have you. Or you can just come and just play. All right, so this presentation is called Out of Focus, Teaching in the Age of Digital Distraction. So maybe you have noticed that in the last few years, we kids, fourth presentation of the day, so I'm starting to get a little loopy, but we're kids at heart, right? But maybe you've noticed that your students, maybe your own children, if you've got kids of your own, or adults, we have definitely gotten distracted by technology, right? And, you know, back in the early 2000s, when the iPhone came out, when, you know, the internet was coming out, all these things started coming out and it was very exciting. We all hopped on board and social media came. But then I think now that it's 2025, we're starting to have that moment. We're like, you know what? Maybe we were a little too enthusiastic and we jumped on that board a little bit too much, because too much of anything is not good, right? Whether it's dessert or kittens or spouse, son, like, right? Too much of anything, it is not good. So I think now we're kind of at that moment. We're like, all right, we're starting to see some ramifications, and what do we do about it? So that's what brings us here today. Oh my goodness, my boss added sound effects. It's not hear those. So our mission today, or our agenda, is first we're going to talk about how are we distracted. Then we're going to talk about how might we teach our students about distraction in tech. I know that's a huge frustration out there because, you know, when we went to college, you know, I went to college to be an English teacher. And then I got my student teaching job in inner city Cleveland, and I realized that most days teaching poetry was like the last thing the kids needed. And suddenly I had to learn how to be a social worker and a mom and all these things. You know, we educators are so responsible for teaching so many things that probably shouldn't be our job, but they are, right? But how do we do it all? It's very overwhelming. So we're going to talk about how might you guys, good English, can teach your kids about distraction in tech. And our final mission is to help you develop a toolkit of best practices to do that. Because we've been through a lot of professional development sessions before where we talk about the problem, but you don't really get solid answers on how to fix it. And we definitely don't want to leave you without some solutions. So that's our mission for today. So, prologue. Why do we need to focus on this issue? What's the deal? And there's a lot to it. Ernest Cline, who wrote Ready Player One, he said, of course I believed them because I was just a kid and I didn't know any better. My brain hadn't even grown to full size yet. So how could I be expected to know when they were BSing me? So I swallowed all the Dark Ages nonsense that they fed me. And we chose that quote because we thought it was representative of, we gave these kids and ourselves as adults all the technology, all the information, the whole world at our fingertips, right? And we didn't do a great job of teaching them what to do with all of that. You know, we just kind of put that into their hands and said, go for it, have at it. And now I think we're really starting to see the ramifications of an uncontrolled playground, right? And for us adults too, you know, our country is currently tearing each other apart because one half thinks that the other half is brainwashed, right? because of all the misinformation and disinformation, and everybody's arguing and convinced that they're the right side. And it's just this war that keeps playing out, a lot of it that has to do with technology. So we have to slow our roll, take a breath, and figure out how to stop that train.
One of the people I really like who talks about this issue is Kevin Honeycutt, and he says that kids are in this digital playground, and we have never put anyone else out on recess duty with them to figure out how we can support what's happening. So for me, this myth of the digital native has been really helpful in framing my thinking. And it's a generation of students who are replete with technology. Everything around them is technological, but it doesn't make them skilled. And I think the analogy one of our colleagues used that I love is with technology, it's a little bit like we handed them War and Peace in second grade and said, good luck with that. Hope it goes well for you. And expect them to be facile and to figure out what's happening. And the reality is that unless we make direct instruction and conversations about why what is happening to them is happening, we're going to find ourselves stuck where we still are. So it is true that they are, surrounded by it, but it is not true that they're actually capable. Because if they were capable, we would not be having the problem we're having. Remember when we used to watch film strips? I think I have to go beep. Next slide, please. If they had it all figured out, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And I very intentionally added these sounds because I think they represent the kind of distraction we have come to just internalize as normal. And I hope that as you have some physiological reactions to them, as you're like, oh, it's so annoying, it reminds you that that is so much of the noise of what's happening in their lives and helps you think about, okay, how am I going to make transparent for my kids what's happening to them and how they're feeling physically, emotionally, mentally, so that they're able to name those things and figure out what skills are going to help them address it. Ray Bradbury talks about in his novel the fact that Fahrenheit 451 is not about government censorship per se. It's about being turned into morons by television. And they stuff you with so much useless information that you feel full. And we have never given kids a tool set, a toolkit to think about, okay, media literacy. How do you know what to believe? Steph and I were talking about this and struck that 60 plus years ago, 70 years now, Bradbury is writing about a phenomenon that is just as applicable today. And one of our messages is really, you can teach digital sort of awareness on its own as a freestanding concept, but in many ways, embedding it in what else you're talking about might be your best bet. And we certainly don't have the magic potion that we're like hiding until the end of the presentation. Surprise, this is what you do. But we do have, we hope, some ways that we can make sense of integrating it into curriculum and giving little bite-sized ways to have the conversation that are as simple as conversation starters, ways that you would be amazed if you've had these conversations. You know what I mean? That kids are really hungry to talk about it, but really not often given the opportunity in a kind of structured way to have those discussions. So whether it's linking it to a text, and we'll talk about in each of your disciplines how else you might do this, or if you're creating little moments for the conversation, anything you're doing that is not nothing is way better than what they're experiencing in the status quo. I think another piece that we want to look at is the impact it has on them and on us. And Steph's going to talk a little bit about what we know about the impact that this generation and we as their adults are experiencing too.
Okay, so in 2022, Pew Research published that 46%, which is almost half of the kids, reported they are online almost constantly. So half of the kids are online almost constantly, which just blows me away because they're in school, like, at least 8 hours of the day. You would hope that they're not online constantly. But for those of us who are teachers, especially with the older kids, we know they're down there trying to, text when they think we're not looking and that kind of thing. But to me, that stat just, ugh. But we adults aren't the best role models, and we've been kind of sucked into this too. And I think that's part of what makes this conversation so difficult is we really have to be honest about ourselves. It's hard to admit as adults, like maybe I screwed that up, but it's okay because nobody gave us any instructional manual on how to be a parent or an educator or a community member. So it's you just figure it out as we go, right? And then we're gonna right the ship. But as for us adults, and these are US adults because our stats are slightly worse than worldwide, we spend an average of 7 hours online a day with about 3.5 devoted to social media. Now, I know I'm online a lot more during the day because I often work remotely. So, I think some of the statistics can be a little skewed because at least some of it's important work, right? I'm not on social media for 8 hours a day. But even just 3.5 hours alone on social media, and that's 3.5 hours where we're just scrolling, 3.5 hours a day. So to me, that's really striking. And there, I did include a couple surveys. Wherever you see anything that's underlined, that's something that's usually a clickable link. And we also check our phones 205 times a day. That's taking our phone and checking it 205 times a day. So we're both in trouble, right? Kids and adults. And so we have to figure this out, right? We are definitely distracted. So what about the impact on the students? And this it's a little dicier. It's not as concrete. Many studies claim depression, anxiety, and other mental health disorders in children have increased substantially since 2007. And 2007 is when the first iPhone came out, which is why we use that year. And that's pretty hard to argue with. Like, definitely the mental health has just spiked. And I'm sure those of you who have been teaching a long time, like me and Jonathan, you have seen that firsthand, right? The question is why? And that's where it gets really tricky. I don't know if any of you have read The Anxious Generation or heard about it. But I really enjoy The Anxious Generation. But like with anything, you have to take it with a big grain of salt because it's very difficult to pinpoint why people have mental health issues. So, just personally, I was born into a family that had suffered anxiety and depression for generations. So, I genetically screwed, right? So's my kid. Like, that's just so, you have the genetics boat. And then, come to adulthood, got some traumatic events that happened. I've worked 20 billion jobs my whole life. I'm very tired and sleep deprived. So if you look at any single one of us, there's a lot of reasons why we are the way that we are, right? Everybody's going to have a different story. And to try and pinpoint in one study, well, they're definitely depressed because they're on social media for 3.5 hours a day. Well, maybe that very well could be the case, but it may not be everybody's truth. And, somebody could spend 3.5 hours on social media a day and not be affected at all because of their genetic makeup. But somebody else could be on for 3.5 hours a day and very much be affected by it. So it's very difficult to say technology is definitely to blame or the only thing to blame. I personally like state hat off, just mom and teacher vision. I do think technology has played a huge part, but I think, sorry if you can hear these horrific bells that are at the school, but I do think it has played a big role in this generation and both our generations. But I don't know that it's ever going to be possible to say, yep, this is the problem and let's get rid of it entirely, if that makes sense. There is no denying that tech can impact us, hormones alone. Okay, there's adrenaline. We've all heard of adrenaline, right? That hormone that's released in response to a stressor, and that can be good or bad. Whether we're running a race and we're really excited, our adrenaline's going, or we're playing Super Mario Brothers and you keep, falling off the icy ledge and you're getting mad, that's adrenaline. Cortisol is our stress hormone. That's released when we're stressed. So I know I'm having a hard time reading the news these days. And so I'm releasing a little bit more cortisol than usual. So that's something that can be affected by technology. Oxytocin, that's actually known as our cuddle hormone. It's kind of our social hormone. And that gets released when someone likes our post or we have a positive social interaction. And dopamine, that is the neurotransmitter that's most known for the key role in addiction, any kind of addiction. But that's our reward that makes us feel good when we get likes watch a funny video, we win a game, we take a drug that feels good. I mean, it's just that reward that our brain's like, this is nice. We should keep doing this. And technology can cause any of those responses to happen to any of us.
Before you move on,
I
Steph,
was just
one
kidding.
thing that we oh, it's fine. One thing we've talked a lot about is that the transparency of a conversation with kids about this can be really helpful. So even if it's at a young age, talking to them about dopamine and the fact that we have a reward system in place that tech is playing on, we don't have to get really dark and sort of scared about it. But as kids get older, getting them to understand that there is an incredible physiological series of responses that are happening as a result of tech, that simple conversation starter can be transformative, realizing it is not me. I'm not a freak that is happening to me or happening to my parents or happening to my teachers. We are all in this same bubble created by tech companies interested in manipulating these and seeing which ones keep us looking at our devices as long as possible. So as an example, this is not built into any other piece of curriculum. You can literally just start talking about these questions, but it might work beautifully in a science class, a health class, a PE class, pairing it with a conversation about other things that impact our well-being, and how the tech factors play into these particular hormones, but how those might be counterbalanced by other activities or things we can do to be more mindful or get better exercise, better sleep that fight back against them.
I can say that I taught this for years. I was a high school English teacher, like Jonathan said, but most of my 20 some years were spent with special ed or kids with trauma or alternative education. So we did a lot of conversations about this is what's going on with your brain, whether it was mental health or addiction or, whatever. It's like you're not a freak. This is, this is how our bodies work. And this causes this and this causes this. And it was truly transformative. And the kids loved it and were fascinated. And it often was a comfort to them, like, oh, especially when we had conversations like, yep, I'm anxious too. You know what I mean? Like it's very transformative. And that was just in an English classroom, but like Jonathan said, you can really weave it into most disciplines. Alrighty, so do we have time for polls? How are we doing? It's 1:30. What does this go to?
We're good.
We're good. Okay. All right. So if you guys can take these polls, do you think tech distraction is a big problem with our students? Not really. Sometimes. No, it's a huge problem. And do you think tech has a large impact on student mental health and or behaviors? So if you can answer those, you do have to do it in your own presentation. You can't like just click on the screen that I'm sharing. You have to do it within your own presentation. Now and then, and these are very inconsistent. I love Canva polls, but in other, okay, yeah, that doesn't help, right? And another presentation today, one of us presenters actually had to click on an answer for it to get going. So I'll just do that, which will skew the vote a little bit, but yeah, that's why you guys are here, right? Holy cow, yeah. Well, I think it's safe to say, even though everybody hasn't voted yet, that a big part of us, and I think I skewed the results because I was the not reallys, but most of us are saying it's a big problem, right? It just really is, which is why we're here and why we're having all the conversations around cell phones and that kind of thing. So.
So I think one big piece for us has been reframing our own thinking. And for me, this happened when I started to realize what I was missing in my own life and with my children, with my wife, that I wasn't really engaging because my tech was distracting me. And it took me from a place where I was mad at my kids, mad at my students to say, wow, this is doing the exact same thing to me. And if I approach this with empathy instead of a sense of blame, and instead turn that energy towards understanding why it's happening, and that our failure isn't or that's a triple negative. Our failure is not in not resisting it. It is in failing to fight back and say, hey, this is not okay. I don't accept this. I think the other really key piece is that it cannot be just you guys. It can't just be in your classrooms. It needs to be more broadly than that in your communities, in conversation with families. We'll give you some suggestions about how you might do that, but getting administrators on board, your public library, your PTA, those conversations extending after the bell rings are transformative as well. So the combination of empathy and shared responsibility to us has really been the game changer in places where we've seen significant progress. So what might that look like? And what do we describe to kids? How do we name for kids how we're being distracted? So turning that energy towards their frustration. I often describe it as the power of the righteous indignation of teenagers is a force in the universe not to be reckoned with. It is incredibly powerful and really great when you get them frustrated, upset. That sounds really strange out loud. When you get them thinking about why they're being manipulated and how they're being manipulated, it is really, really powerful to get them as allies in changing their own experience. So we'll take a look at a couple ways you might be able to do that. The first one is to talk to them about the attention economy and saying to them, as we described, games have a physiological response. Why is it that their heart rates skyrocket when they're playing something like Fortnite? We've seen kids at 160, 170 beats per minute heart rates when they're sitting still. That is happening because someone is manipulating, pulling the dials and twisting them to make them have the experiences they have. Showing them things like the typing awareness indicator and saying, is that the breakup dots? No, it is the industry saying, I want you to keep looking at your phone until the next notification comes in. Or bottomless feeds and doom scrolling, where there's this sense that there's no end. That is exactly by design. It is set up so that they don't reach the bottom. How do they feel about that? What might they do to combat that? Two other things to consider, talking to them about the impact of and the concerns that are raised by 24/7 news and information. What does it do to their sleep? What does it do to their sense of calm? And then talk to them about some of the really specific mechanisms that are in place. The one that is really easy to understand is intermittent variable rewards. This is the reason why we keep pulling slot machine arms. It's because if they were to reward us every time, we would wait and just find that it was getting boring because every time we pulled it, something positive or always something negative happened. But the fact that we don't know, we know something good may happen, that is enough to keep us trying and trying and trying to get that dopamine reward. And that is built into social media, games, all kinds of websites where they're looking for ways to keep you looking. And if you peel back the onion for kids or the shell for kids and say, what is happening when that happens? It can be really powerful for them to understand. Another piece. It was about 6 vibrations too many. Sorry, I thought I had cut it a little shorter than that. Is to talk to them about aspects like what you just experienced. I think so often people are like, oh, it's on vibrate, it doesn't matter. Think about your body response to vibrate, right? And have them think about that. One of our colleagues will have students put their phones on their leg and try not to touch it. And it's amazing to watch that kind of mindfulness exercise unfold. And then if it vibrates, all heck breaks loose, right? It falls on the floor. They're worried. They feel badly. I talk to students about the disappearing clock, which is when you look at an app, the clock up in the corner is coded to not be there by certain games. Why is that? The same reason as the casino doesn't have phones on clocks on the wall or windows to make you lose track of time. I talk to adults and parents about the Facebook Marketplace search you know how when you get on and you're looking for something and what you're looking for isn't there and you get something totally random? Facebook has the money to pay people to make a better search. So someone intentionally is making a search that brings you random things and makes it difficult to find what you're looking for so that you stay on. Streaks as a concept as well, and the one that makes me laugh out loud is mindfulness app streaks, that they have gamified mindfulness. But if you get them thinking about the idea that they are being compelled by the reward of a streak, I will actually break my streaks on purpose. I play spelling bee every day on New York Times, and I will every so often intentionally break a streak of playing so that I notice how that feels, and I'm not allowing those jerks at the New York Times to get me.
You wanna mess with auto playing or just keep going?
Now go ahead.
Okay.
We looked also at another possible text to suggest, and if you know feed, the characters talk about how they're making you want things. That everything we've grown up with, the stories on the feed, the games, all of that, it's streamlining our personalities so that we are easier to sell to. And talk about prescient, really current conversation. Even if you were to just read a passage from feed to a middle school or a high school audience and get talking about what that means to be effectively groomed to be consumers, it is exactly the world that we're in now in many ways that is this dystopian nightmare in Anderson's novel. You might also think about ways that you develop in them that anger, that frustration, right? And one of the ones I love is the TikTok algorithm unpacking. We don't need to watch it right now, but that video will show you a quick version of how it works. But what I can tell you is that the mission stated in TikTok is that it is to increase joy. To which I say, baloney. And when you look at the whistleblower's memo, the memo that the whistleblower from TikTok got released, it says point blank, our mission is to increase DAU, which is daily active users. And it also shows a simplified version of the algorithm that demonstrates how the combination of what you click on, how long you stay on it, and what it leads you to, that is your behavior as the consumer, maps onto the things that TikTok gets paid for you clicking on, and it puts in front of you the things that make them greater profit. And the result is not that you see what you're looking for or what you searched for, but what they are getting paid for to put in front of you. And if you get kids thinking about that, I don't know if you've ever had kids describe this, but I've had students say to me, "Oh, I don't Google it anymore. I TikTok it." And I think like, like not that Google isn't dangerous enough and it's putting the results in front of you, but you talk about a search engine built on the concept, like baked in the profit motives, it really starts to illustrate for them why it's not a reliable source. So how do we think about this as a like an arc of change for them? I think one great framework is talking about moving them towards digital leadership. So George Couros, who is a great kind of ed tech thinker, describes digital citizenship as the responsible and ethical use of technology. But he says digital leadership is the next step. And that's where we look at them improving the lives, well-being, and circumstances of others, moving them from being just consumers to being creators, whether that is to join a movement, as you see here, something like Black Lives Matter or Never Again, the anti-guns in school movement, whether it is utilizing some of the tools that are out there. There's an incredible group called the Center for Humane Technology. They're the ones who made the Netflix documentary. And they talk about in what they call their teen toolkit, which is the next slide. They give you this opportunity to access all kinds of tools that help kids develop digital leadership skill. And so thinking about it as moving from consumers to creators, even by itself, is a great message about positive use of technology and not subjecting yourself to all the things that they might, that the industry might be trying to get you to do. So as we go through these next ones, we're going to give you about 30 seconds or so on each of these subject matter, and then share where we'd like you to take a look to develop that toolkit that we talked about. We've curated some resources for you that we hope are helpful, but we want to start by highlighting how it might work to have these conversations in several different disciplines or different venues.
So one thing that we can start with is teaching students about digital distraction resources, including why it happens. So just like what we talked about, teach them about how their brain works, teach them about how they learn, teach them what tech companies, their missions are to distract us. Um, Teach them the why. The why is everything. Like, why is this relevant to you? How does this affect your life? That was like two other presentations that I gave today, is that the why is everything to all of us. If we don't understand why it's important, then we're not as engaged and we're not as willing to learn it, or it's not going to absorb as much. You can focus on media literacy and rhetorical analysis, and we have a bunch of resources for that that will show you, and media balance and well-being. So more strategies to make it transparent. Again, like, show them that transparency, and don't hide it from them. I think some people are like, well, we don't want to tell the kids about this. No, we want to tell them. We want to know what they're getting themselves into. So again, teaching them how their brains develop, make it interdisciplinary and across grade levels. So I think Jonathan and I can both attest that as English teachers, a lot of that stuff kind of gets dumped into English classes. It can't be. It has to be everybody on board across the realm, K-12, all the subjects. And yeah, a lot of times they overlap, but I think any of us know just because you learn something once doesn't mean you're going to remember it forever. So it just needs to be this constant thread that is woven throughout. And just like a video game, give kids goals and challenges. Have them figure out how to beat the game. Ask them what they think. They're just so much more brilliant than we give them credit for most of the time. They have a lot to offer. They're the ones who are going to be taking care of us one day, for better or for worse. And they have so much insight that we older folks don't even understand, right? Like, my son's a sophomore in high school, and I'm like, here, kid, you are kind of a digital native, but kind of not, but fix this. They have a lot to offer. We adults don't know everything, or at least I don't. I know that. My boss will probably affirm that I don't know everything. One incredible source is Common Sense Education. You can click on this link. It'll bring you to the sign-in page if your school isn't a part of it already. It's free. You can sign in with because they can just sign in on their own, right? Not just, okay, yeah, that's what I thought. But it is just an incredible range of resources. You can see here, there's lesson plans, digital citizenship, there's curriculum, lesson plans, lesson collections, dilemmas. This we're going to show you in the next slide, the social emotional learning resource center, implementation guides, toolkits by topic. There's digital connections for all the grades. Wonderful professional development. Like, every time I go on this website, they add something and it's incredible. I used a lot of their stuff when I was teaching freshmen, but one thing that they encourage you to do, which I very much appreciate, is that they want you to take their stuff and adapt it however meets your needs and the kids in front of you. It's not like, no, we created this, you have to use it exactly as we said. They're like, no, you take it and you make it work for you and your kids, which I think is super helpful. So we'll show you some common sense resources in a little bit as well. This is that social and emotional guide that we talked about. It's an incredible resource of resources. Vocab is just not coming to me at this point.
The CASEL standards, you may know, are the SEL standards that are used nationally. And what they've done is taken their curriculum that is organized by 6 major categories that we'll look at in just a second, and reformatted it or reorganized it so that they match onto these 5 domains. So they'll talk about self-management in digital life, responsible decision-making in digital life. So the link on the left will take you to the Common Sense resource. And if you're not as familiar with CASEL and those standards, the link on the right will take you to the CASEL website and where they talk about it.
And CASEL in itself is a phenomenal website.
Oh,
So
so good.
great that they work together. So elementary, I know sometimes probably at the beginning of this, elementary teachers, if there are any of you, you're probably like, oh man, this is going to be about middle and high school, and I'm going to be left out, but not at all. There are a ton of resources. Again, Common Sense Media. Um, this is organized again by topic like digital footprint and identity, relationships and communication, cyberbullying. You can filter by grades for K through 5. It definitely, the younger we start, the more successful everything is, right? Early intervention is everything. So you are definitely a part of this, and there are a ton of resources for you. English class. I had not heard of this short story before. Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut. You may know Kurt from Cat's Cradle. That's one of his more famous novels. This is a short story. Wicked creepy. It's worth a read. You can find it for free online. But it describes a society where tech is used to hamper people's abilities in the name of creating equality. But they kind of go about it the wrong way. So, it's just an example of a story that you can use in English class to talk about how is this similar to our world today, to our technology today? Who controls our tech? Why do they do it? So definitely, we give a lot more resources of other books that you can use in classes that can talk about these themes later on. Math class. There's this book called The Weapons of Math Destruction. It is a nonfiction book, but it's really great book about algorithms and how tech uses it against us, like what Jonathan was talking about earlier. But strategies you can use for math class include like have them do their own research and compare data from different sources, whether it's elementary kind of math. How many of us have done this? How many of us have checked our phone twice a day or whatever it is? It can be simple math all the way to sophisticated statistics. Teach them how to use digital tools like spreadsheets. Share the findings and projects within Google Classroom or whatever other LMS systems you guys have in your schools. Talk about constructive feedback, all that good stuff. So there's plenty of things in math that you can do as well. I think math teachers also feel like, how can I possibly integrate this into math class? But again, we'll show you some resources where there's actually a lot you could do with math and digital citizenship. All right, take
Cool.
it away, Mr. Werner.
Looking at history class, just as one example, the main school library network gives us access to a number of Gale databases. And this phenomenal one, which is called Opposing Viewpoints, goes way down into middle elementary and is set up to look at both sides of each issue and giving them an opportunity to compare point A versus point B, and then what's the truth between those two is an unbelievably valuable experience. A version of this that I've also seen is reading across tabs. So opening 5, 6, 7 tabs on the same issue, and then having them look between those. It's called lateral reading, and seeing what happens when they compare the site that they're getting the information from and what the information they're being provided, even though the topic is the same. Next one is ways to think about it in a STEM class. Weirdly, one of the best resources we found was from Texas, and we're not quite sure what it was that led to this conversation there, but they give some fantastic suggestions about ways to bring this conversation into all kinds of STEM classes. One we wanted to share, and we'll skip the video, but I wanted you to see what it is. There's a partnership between Common Sense Education and something called Above the Noise. And the creator has, I linked on the bottom there, the playlists, and you'll see that there's ones related to all different disciplines, all different issues. They're between 5 and 8 minutes long, and they just give you a great place to start a conversation. I think in general, getting it out of your mouth and into someone else's is a fantastic practice. So you'll find Common Sense does this as well. They offer teen voices videos where kids are speaking to one another, where you take it out of like you giving your opinion or your sort of point of view and say, let's objectively together look at what this person is saying and see what happens. And I think Above the Noise does a fantastic job of giving you that chance to be like a co-viewer with your students on all kinds of issues that may apply to your particular discipline.
It's that notion like they may not listen to mom and dad or teacher, but they might listen to somebody else, right?
The nice guy in the hoodie. Art and music. I was really struck that the National Association of Art Educators, of Educators of Art, offers this mission statement around the use of digital citizenship principles in their classrooms. And if you look there in the middle, the use of critical thinking skills to arrive at ethical choices related to the selection, creation, curation, and dissemination of content, and the relationships formed on and through digital media, pulling in those questions. And as Steph mentioned, this works beautifully in any kind of LMS. But if you take their attention to how they interact with one another when it's asynchronous, when they're not together, we have this concept of kind of the reduced inhibition and that they experience when they see each other's work and the person is not in front of them. Art gives a great place to have that conversation, as does music. That song is stupid. That thing you created was ridiculous. You are not talented. Something they would never say face to face. They might type, and then sharing with them what might be a better approach to this. What does constructive feedback look like as opposed to just attacks? Maybe don't open the newspaper though, because watching how we comment to one another. YouTube, oh my gosh, although great, if you have the right audience, showing them how people interact with each other in YouTube comments is like prime material to get them thinking about how we behave online and how we might be more digital leaders and not just digital consumers. Um, Here's how we set it up. Along the top there, you can see tinyurl.com/. I didn't read this as a word when I created it. It is out of focus G drive, good drive. But what we'd like you to take a look at for the next several minutes is what we've curated, whether it's this general resource, which is the first thing you'll come to when you get there, or there's class subject organization. So we set that one up so that as you're looking at it, it's the next slide. The kind of organization is by your discipline and what you're teaching. And then we also have it by tech concept. So many of those are cross-listed between both, depending on which way you want to enter. But if you want to look at the tech concept menu, it includes things like media balance and well-being. I think it is shown next. Yeah.
Maybe.
Data tracking, anyway, those areas that you might focus on it as kind of the tech aspect of it. As you're exploring it, we're going to give you about 7 minutes to take a look. We'd love for you to not silo yourself. So if you're an English teacher, don't just look at English. Look at some of the other resources that are there. Don't limit yourself to just the grades you teach. I think you'll find, as Steph said about the elementary school teachers, there are ways to turn what is set up as a middle school or a high school exercise into something incredibly valuable for younger students. I mentioned the idea of the conversations about hormones, right? You're not going to have that conversation in the same way with third and ninth graders, but you can definitely have a conversation about how we're getting dopamine rewards from what we're doing. As you're doing that, also, we'd love for you to take some notes on things that you think are interesting that you're finding, and then we'll ask you to share out your findings so that we kind of crowdsource this toolkit over the next several minutes. In the next slide, you'll see a way to contribute those ideas. We're using Mentimeter. And if you just go to menti.com and then use the code 2298-4286 along the top there, or you can scan the QR code. It's just going to give you a free response option, and you'll have access to this afterwards, basically sharing with each other ideas, things you're noticing from what we've curated for you, and just as important, if not more so, your personal experience where you've been successful in bringing these conversations to your classrooms. We'd love to hear about that as well. And feel free to use the chat if you'd prefer. We can transfer the information over to that. But we'll give you till let's say 57. We have just a couple things we want to share before you go to peruse and to contribute to this.
And if you have any questions or comments or anything that you want to make right now, please go for it. What do you think, Jonathan? Should we pull him back? Just a few minutes left. All right. Well, you guys just have a few minutes left. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So hopefully you guys were able to at least get on and find some things and get some ideas. Holy crow.
I'm looking stuff at the live side. There they go. They just take a second to populate. So if you're in the Menti, you'll see them pop up more, and then they'll be displayed here in the slides. If you go back to our slides as well, you'll be
Okay.
able to see them. The two other things we're going to share are a feedback form, which we would love to have your thoughts on, how you think this went, what would be helpful for us to do differently in the future, what we could do that would be consistent with what we've done so far. You'll see that there's a QR code for that as well as a tiny URL. And then we have our contact information. As we said, there's 14 of us presenting today on all different issues. AI, computer science, use of technology in elementary classrooms. All of those are things we'd be happy to share. And this is our team that's doing that. We talk about things like tech integration, digital citizenship, digital instructional design, artificial intelligence, computer science, cybersecurity, any of those areas. And we actually have a catalog that we provided because we felt like it was difficult for people to say, like, I don't know what I want exactly. So we've given you some suggestions, but we are by no means limited to those. You'll see also that we have a general email address that's doe-ltt@maine.gov along the bottom there. And that goes to our whole team. And then we just parse it out and reply, whichever of us is most closely related to your request. Looking at the slides, you'll also see that there's the ability to get your credit hours for today. And that link will take you to a form. You just type in your name and it will auto produce a PDF. See, that was our like game over little sign there. But credit, out of focus credit will give you the participation certificate for your professional development hours. We really appreciate so many of you joining us. Fantastically helpful. Thank you. And we hope that this model has worked for you. We'd love feedback on that as well. If you can think of ways that we could do it differently, we would love to know. But most importantly, we appreciate you just being a part of the conversation because it is really literally just starting to talk about it that gets the ball rolling and can really give us opportunities for conversations we didn't know our kids were ready to have. Whether it's as young as kindergarten or all the way up through high school, they're going to bring you ideas of stuff said that you just never even thought of, and really will be delighted by how excited they are to have the conversation and to have it be moderated in a way that really gives them a chance to learn.
Yes, thank you guys so much. We hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday. You're almost done and have a wonderful weekend. And thank you for
Some
hanging.
pie. See you guys.